Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our next session here at Future CX and Contact Center Trends and Technology in APAC. Joining me today for using AI to achieve 100% agent evaluation are Steve Nattrass, Product Director at Enghouse Interactive, and Alex Black, Chief Technology Officer, also from Enghouse Interactive. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good morning, Felicia. So to say, good afternoon, Felicia. How are you?
I think we can easily say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I feel like we can definitely cover all parts of the world, but I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good afternoon, all. My name is Alex Black. I'm the CTO of Enghouse. Today we're going to be talking about the use of AI in the contact center to do quite a number of things, but specifically to look at how we can help improve agent performance is one of the key things. So I've been in the company about 12 years, and my responsibility is all around our strategy and our products. I'm joined today by Steve Nattrass. Steve, why don't you give us a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Alex. So yes, I'm a product director here at Enghouse. I have responsibility for a number of our products, all centered around the use of AI and natural language understanding across all channels in the contact center. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see more of that later on. First, I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of who Enghouse is. We've been going since about 1984. We're about 2,000 people. We turn over about $500 million. We're based in Canada. Although we do have operations in about 120 different countries. One of the key things as any technology company is the intellectual property we create, and we have around 175 patents that we hold today on technology that was created by ourselves. That technology relates to a very broad portfolio around the customer interaction management. We have inbound and outbound contact centers, as you'd expect, both premise-based and cloud-based, and we have all the supporting peripheral applications around that you would expect around quality management, etc. So we fairly broad portfolio to help address most aspects of customer interaction management. So that's all I want to say about us, because you're here really to hear about some of the way we apply that technology to help improve the contact center performance. I think without question, year over year and study after study, it definitely, there's a very strong correlation between customer service and profitability and revenue. And the contact center is a key part of that customer value chain. And therefore it's important that operation works as well as possible. And over the last couple of years, providing good customer service has always been a challenging thing. It doesn't happen by magic. It's always been a challenging thing. And over the last couple of years, there's been some even more challenging things that have been sent to try us. There's an increasing number of interactions, and they're coming from all channels. It used to just be voice. Then we're seeing a very strong move to digital. The start of the pandemic, it moved a little bit back to voice again, which I suppose wasn't a surprise when you look at it in hindsight. Now it's moving back out into the digital world. We're seeing even more complex queries come along, again, sometimes exacerbated by the challenges of the last year or two. And one of the things that's definitely something that seems to be happening as a direct result of the pandemic is that we are seeing more demanding customers. Customers are becoming more challenging. That's always been the case. Customers become more sophisticated and more demanding. But it definitely, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing customers to be far more demanding than they were when we went in. And I think to a degree that is understandable, but it does mean we are facing some big challenges, some increased levels of challenges. And one of the one of the technologies that people tend to be turning to help address some of those challenges is around artificial intelligence. I won't go through this slide in great detail, but there's many, many areas you can employ that technology. We'll talk about some of those later on, but rather than go through that slide, what I'd rather do is talk about some real-life examples of how people have applied the technology to help provide better customer experience. And one of the examples, and I always say to people, before you apply any technology, make sure you're really clear what you're trying to achieve. If you don't understand what your strategy is, you're not going to get the most out of it, and it might not have the impact that you want. In fact, it could have a derogatory impact. So these are a couple of examples where, from our customers around the world, where they had very, very clear objectives, what they were trying to do. And on the left-hand side, we have a social housing company who they needed to provide extended service. They needed to provide more accurate answers 24/7. And they actually turned to probably the most common of all artificial intelligence components in a contact center, which is the chatbot. And they found some very, very significant performance improvements around customer satisfaction, and also improved agent productivity as well, because the agents were focused on the more complex interaction rather than the simpler ones. In the middle, we look at real-time coaching. This is an insurance company, so there's a lot of regulation around insurance, and they were struggling to manage compliance and make sure that they were writing good quality business, because ultimately that meant the customer would be happier with them. And what they did was they're actually using real-time coaching, where our software is listening to both sides of the interaction, customer and agent. It's guiding the agent in real time, telling them to speed up a bit, telling them to slow down a bit, speak up. It's also pointing out how stressed the customer may be, so the agent can moderate how they're communicating. And ultimately, that not only ended up and it's also checking that the agent says certain things, so that they're talking about return periods and your 14-day cool down periods and those kinds of things. So ultimately what happened was the contracts that were being written were actually of higher quality, because there were fewer disputes afterwards. And actually, customer satisfaction rose because of that, and also because the conversation, the interaction itself, was more carefully moderated. Without a supervisor listening in, our software was actually providing that guidance real time. And last but not least, the example there is in healthcare. Again, another industry that's very highly regulated, and you have to be very, very careful how what you say and how you say it. And in this case, we are providing assistance to the agent around email and web chat handling, where we're providing suggested responses. So the agent becomes more productive, but at the same time, rather than relying on them just typing everything manually, it will suggest responses which provide consistency and accuracy, and actually it improved the efficiency as well. So there's a number of examples where artificial intelligence in different ways can add different value to the company, to the contact center, and also to the customer. And again, we talked about improving that customer experience. But artificial intelligence is not just about the agent. You can use it in other areas of the contact center as well. And that's, for example, where we have in the supervisor, in the back office, there's lots of data in a contact center, huge amount of data. This example is a bank where it's a retail bank where they are trying to understand the customer's perception of their mobile application. And what they did was they gathered a huge amount of data from those interactions, and they then went away and analysed that, and they could determine how much value the customer saw in the mobile application. But even more importantly, in analysing that information, they were actually able to derive a number of insights as to how the customer perceived them, not just the application. And through that process, they actually identified about $4 or $5 million worth of customer business that was at risk because of poor satisfaction. So there's 4 examples, pretty powerful, of how we can help use the technology to make business better. And I will now hand over to Steve, who will take us through another example of how you can apply the technology to improve both the performance of the contact centre and ultimately the perception, your customer's perception of you. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. So, absolutely. So what we're talking about here is quality assurance and quality management. But before we get into the details of how AI can help us here, let's look at some of the challenges that contact centers are facing with agent evaluation, because it really is the cornerstone of addressing a lot of the challenges that Alex was talking about earlier. It aims to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the agents, highlighting areas for improvement, best practices, and all of this directly links to better customer service and to better business outcomes. So I would argue that not only is it just important, but quality management is business critical. But which agents should you evaluate? The new ones that you've just hired, put through training, the ones that have had performance issues before, the ones that are pushing the new marketing promotion, or the ones providing service to your most complex products or most difficult customers. How do you decide? And how can you possibly handle so many priorities and pay attention to so many customer issues all at once? The reality is that you can't. So there has to be a priority. And supervisors and dedicated quality management teams review calls, emails, web chats to assess the agent's abilities to successfully handle these customer interactions, identify areas where improvements can be made, either through coaching or other process changes. But currently, contact center supervisors use tools to manually check only a random selection of interactions, simply because they just don't have time to check every single one. Even when they're listening to calls at double the speed and reading emails, which obviously is quicker to read an email than it is to write one. But listening to the average calls or reading emails and web chat transcripts where there isn't anything particular to note isn't a valuable use of the supervisor's time. Their time would be much better spent coaching agents, because that's where the supervisors really bring value to the contact center. This inefficiency use of time is not the only issue. Human biases also have an impact. Was it the first call of the day that the supervisor listened to, or was it the last call of a very long and difficult day? And the natural variation between supervisors also means that in order to ensure consistency between these sessions, the quality assessors need to spend time with regular calibration exercises where they check each other's work. But given that supervisors are only listening to a small fraction of the calls and reading the emails, it means that there means that at least 95% of the interactions are going unchecked. So 95% where there might be a coachable moment, 95% where there might be a significant or recurring issue that needs to be addressed. But before we get into looking at how using our own AI engine means that Smart Quality is able to deliver more precise results to drive tangible improvements, we have our first poll question. So here's an opportunity for all of you to get involved. So here we go. So we have 5 options here. Do you already or do you plan to evaluate interactions within your contact center? 5 options. We would like to start evaluating interactions. We manually evaluate live interactions. We manually evaluate recorded interactions. We use an evaluation tool to score interactions, or we have no plans to evaluate our interactions. I'll give you a few moments to answer the question.
So while we wait for everyone to select, I've been asking a lot of the other speakers, particularly as they put up some poll questions, where you feel our audience will probably gravitate towards based off of your experience.
It's a mixed bag, to be honest, Felicia. So there's such a broad range of contact centers out there. Some of the smaller contact centers who have a higher ratio of supervisor to agent. Maybe they don't do any evaluations at all because they're on the floor. The supervisors are on the floor all the time. Whereas the bigger contact centers, they have dedicated teams, so they do a huge amount of evaluation. It's a real big spread, and so it'd be interesting to see where the audience is today.
Okay. Absolutely. Well, then let's go see the results.
There we go. And so, just as predicted, I think we've got a spread. We've got quite a high proportion of wanting to start, and that's kind of interesting. So, I mean, Alex, in terms of don't currently do it, but would like to, and then the rest, there's a spread across listening to live calls or evaluating recorded interactions.
Yeah, and that's not a surprise, Steve. You know, there's the largest bar there is around people wanting to start evaluating. It's not a simple thing. It requires discipline. It requires a whole raft of process around it to do it well, and it's kind of one of these things that people tend to put aside. We're all humans at the end of the day, and a lot of what happens in around customer interaction management is driven by the human, and therefore you do see that. So kind of expected to see that, and I'm not surprised.
And it's great from our perspective to see that we had a 0% and we have no plans to evaluate interactions.
Yeah. I think in terms of overall making contact center better, that's a good sign as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dig in. Let's go and have a look. So we have our own AI engine. It's based on proprietary technology, and it's different to most others because it's based on a hybrid approach that uses natural language processing to give us a greater level of precision than other solutions. But that's a great set of words, but what does it really mean? And talking of great sets of words, we've got a word cloud. And this is a common tool to try and show what is being talked about within a body of text. But on its own, this collection of words doesn't really tell us a lot. What we really need is more detail. So at Enghouse, we recognize that a word on its own is not enough to extract meaning. Out of context, the word has little meaning and no sentiment, which means that the minimum unit of meaning is a sentence. So we've got these 3 sentences, all mention the word delivery, but they all mean something fundamentally different. And our AI engine is able to achieve this extra level of precision, which is so vital when analyzing what's happening within calls and emails. From a non-technical perspective, we've taught our engine how to understand human language. So the subject, the verb, the object, to differentiate between questions, statements, requests, and issues. I liken this to when you were at school, you had to underline the subject and the verb and the object, that sort of concept. Our engine can do that, which means that it can understand all of the multitude of different ways that humans say the same thing. And it's not just down to one very specific phrase. It's not an exact script that you're trying to match. It's actually able to interpret what's being said. So what we'll do is we'll go and have a look at exactly how this is happening. So what we're going to look at is the Enghouse Quality Management Suite, also known as QMS. It can record phone calls, the agent screen, and digital interactions, emails, web chats. And QMS also has an agent evaluation module. which is used by supervisors to manually assess the performance of their agents, identifying training requirements, whether it's part of the employee appraisal process, but also whether to try and improve the overall efficiency of the contact center. So let's jump in and take a look. So we'll just see this load. So there we go. So Smart Quality is able to automate this evaluation process, and we'll look at this later on. But we'll start by looking at some of the other things. So we'll start here. We'll look at some of the flags and themes that Smart Quality is able to identify. So we start with, I talked about, identify the difference between a question, a problem, or whether the customer's asking for help. The emotion from a customer, they're angry, sad, frustrated. Different types of risk, customer effort, fraud, churn, and we'll talk about those in a bit more detail later on. And then finally, the overall satisfaction of the customer, positive, negative, neutral. So what we'll then look at is the benefit of adding these flags is that it allows us to search for these calls. And so once Smart Quality has analyzed the call, you can then go and search. So here we go, we're just going to do the search. And so we're going to set the flag, we find the emotion collection, and select angry, and we just expand the number of days and click search, and we pull back this result. I'm just going to look here. And then we can see here that the system has identified that the customer was asking a question, they were angry, they had some, and they also flagged that customer effort. And customer effort is about being able to detect whether the customer has had to do something which was, but they had to expend more effort than they were anticipating. They had to contact the business multiple times. They didn't receive a notification when they were expecting to, that sort of thing. And that's a really clear precursor to a potential churn issue, i.e. when the customer says they're going to leave the business. The different types of risk, but the customer effort is a precursor to a churn. So it's something that needs to be addressed within the contact center. So let's jump in and have a look at how the supervisor would manually do this, normally do this manually. So let's go up, and here we have the, go and look at the recordings. So normally what the supervisor would do is they would select the call type. So here we're going to go calls, select a group of users, a whole department, particular team, etc. Select that, select the date range. We'll just remove this flag because we don't want that anymore. And then ordinarily we would recommend our customers to use this select a random result. So this avoids oversampling, the supervisor assessing a single agent too many times, that sort of thing. And so then we click search, and then obviously every business's scorecard, I'll just select one of these, every business's scorecards are going to be unique to that business. What's that business looking for within their calls? But for now, what we're going to do, we'll just select one of these scorecards, this one, and then we'll go ahead and look at this. So what happens is the supervisor starts listening to the call, and so as they listen to the call, they assess against a number of predetermined questions. And did they answer the call correctly? Did they provide the right greeting? And then the supervisor goes through and answers the questions. And just go through here. And then one of the other features is that you can select little snippets of audio to map to specific questions. And this means that if the supervisor ever needs to come back to this assessment, they can just listen to just the individual part of the call that's interesting. And what this really highlights, though, is that, and this is one of the reasons why it takes so many contact centers are looking to start, and they haven't actually started yet assessing calls, is it's a really time-consuming process. The if a call is 40 minutes long, it could take 40 minutes to assess, to listen to the whole call. And so what we'll just do, we'll just save this this sample, and we'll go on and look at the results. So let's just go and look at the results. So what we do, all of those results from that evaluation gets fed into the reports, and then we can choose to run this report. So we can listen to the we can understand what's happening within the contact center. Obviously call recording's not going to know your SLAs, but what we can see is when we just select this, we can see here that our greeting score may be below what we're expecting, but maybe our wait etiquette, for example, is more in line with what we're expecting to be able to the contact center as a whole to hit. But Smart Quality is able to automate the whole of this process. So, and it does this by replicating what the supervisor might have to do while doing that, listening to that call. So we just talked about what the process of which the supervisor follows when they're going through each step. And what we'll see now is the setup. So we'll go into the settings. So let's just bring this up. See the settings. Go back to the settings here. And so what we can see here is the flags that we were talking about earlier. Let's just get here. There we go. So it's the flags that we were talking about earlier. So then we can see the thought process. It's designed as a flow, as a thought process. And we come through, and then as it comes through, we've got a scorecard for each of the media type, chat, email, voice. And let's go and look at the voice one. And we can see here that the different types of questions. So we have the same questions that we were looking at earlier. And we can see here that this is scored out of 4. And we can see here which of the things that is this Smart Quality, which of the phrases is Smart Quality listening for? Hello, thank you for calling, etc. And then Smart Quality gives us 1 point per answer, and then you can see the drop down of other things that we can add to the scorecard. And so what we're going to do is then just look at the number of evaluations. We saw that there was just a few earlier on, but when we actually look at Smart Quality has done a lot more. So it's able to assess all of the calls, all of the emails, all of the web chats. If we just look at this one sample, here we got exactly the same setup, but this is where the Smart Quality has answered the call, so assessed the call. And we can see each of the different elements and the information that Smart Quality is assessed, extracted from that, listening to the call automatically. And then with all of this data, it's not just within the QMS. It can also be pushed out into dashboarding solutions. So what we have here, so we have a view of our advanced dashboards. And so we can see here in this, we've got 614 interactions spread across calls, emails, web chats. And then we've got that churn. We talked about that as a risk earlier, where the customer said they're going to go to a competitor or something like that. And then we can also see a summary of the performance of the agents. Just here, and we can see that one of the agents is struggling. Now, without Smart Quality, we may not have known that agent is struggling. We may have assessed something called where they've done really well. We've missed that actually overall they're struggling. And then we can see that in this contact center in the evenings, they have a higher percentage of negative calls. So we might want to dig in to look at why that is. So we can look at that trending within the system. But what's Smart Quality doing behind the scenes? So as we've seen, Smart Quality seeks to replicate the manual process. So supervisors set aside the time, they manually score against the criteria. They assess they identify any coaching needs, and then they get onto the piece where the supervisor provides the most value, which is coaching the agent. And then they repeat as much as time allows. So within a day, a supervisor, if the call is 40 minutes long, the supervisor may only listen to 4, 5, maybe even 6 calls, and then get on to actually coaching those agents. So you during a day you may have a lot more calls, and you're just not getting to it. But where Smart Quality, we look at where Smart Quality works, it continually listens to calls, reads emails. They're all scored consistently. There's no variation. We saw how Smart Quality can add flags to the calls so they can be found later. The ones that are important from that point of view, and the supervisor can then review the exceptions and coach the agent, spending more time coaching the agent so that you can assess. If you think of the highest percentage of interactions that I've ever seen that were reviewed is 5%. This is more frequently just under 3. So if you're thinking 5%, you think, we can't do anywhere near that. You're not alone. 3% is far more common. But it means that you can do, with Smart Quality, you can assess 20 times more, 5% to 100%. So you get 100% of the calls assessed. And the piece we'll look at now is trying to understand how is Smart Quality and then our linguistics capable of understanding this. So we just look at this sample. And so here we have a transcript, so a regular retail conversation, and we can see that Smart Quality is able to assess these individual pieces. And then one that's interesting here was this last one, missing theme. It's able to identify that the delivery in this sentence, the it in this sentence means delivery. And then it collects all the other information and it gives an overall summary of that the satisfaction is negative. And then completes the assessment. So what we've seen is quality management is a vital part of any contact center. Identifies additional coaching and training needs in order to provide a high quality and importantly consistent service. However, as I've discussed quite a few times, most contact centers only approach 5% of the interactions. So issues can be missed. In fact, they probably will be missed, especially in environments where agents are covering a broad range of topics and some subjects don't come up very often. So Smart Quality is able to evaluate 100% of interactions. But with listening to calls is obviously a lost time from a supervisor's perspective. And it's also the supervisors are prone to those human biases I spoke about earlier. So Smart Quality is objective and consistent. So we can progress without all the checks and balances. And then on top of that, Smart Quality is able to access and unlock additional insights that you may not otherwise have got. You may not have understood that you're potentially going to lose this one customer if you didn't reach out and do some proactive customer service with them. So all of this means that Smart Quality is helping you continually assess and continually improve the contact center outcomes and improve customer retention, which all of these things means that you're going to improve your revenue. And before we get into the wrap up, we have our next poll question. So here we go. So how much time do you spend on evaluations today? We know that everyone is either doing something or looking to start. So we've got 4 options here. We spend less than 5 hours a month. We spend 5 to 10 hours per month. We spend more than 10 hours a month. We do not currently evaluate our interactions. So we'll just give everyone a moment to answer that.
So once again, gentlemen, would love to hear from you as we wait for our audience to chime in. Where do you feel most of those that you see within the community spend on evaluations?
It's down to the contact center size.
Okay.
Those that are doing evaluation, I suspect the larger contact centers, they're spending well over 10 hours a month.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
They have whole teams dedicated to it. I can remember in one contact center that I visited a little while ago now. It's been a while since I've been to anywhere other than this room. They had a team of 8 people sat in a room listening to calls all day, every day.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
And so you can imagine that 8 people can get through a lot more than 10 hours a month. So
absolutely,
we get a balance there.
All right, shall we see where most of our audience spends time on evaluation? Okay, great.
There we go. So
really kind of a split across.
Yeah, fairly even split, but the majority are in the middle two, 5 to 10 or more than 10. So that's the and then an equal split between the outer two as well. So less than 5 hours, or they don't currently evaluate, and that's probably not surprising because we saw that there's that high number of people wanting to start, and so therefore maybe they're doing the occasional, they haven't got a regular process in place, or something like that, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's definitely kind of around where we expect and what we've been seeing. I think the key thing is we're all human beings. Every single one of us can improve every day, and it can be just an incredibly small thing, but as long as it's constant improvement. And this isn't about spying on people. This is about trying to just help make things better, to help improve customer experience. And ultimately, if it's true that it does tie back to revenue and profitability, then you should gain significantly through it. And that's key. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you, Steve. I think what you've seen Steve take us through is kind of another interesting application of AI as a technology. And I think the key thing we've seen now, we've kind of talked in varying depths of some examples of how you can apply the technology in customer experience and make things better. But there's, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different areas and a lot of different tools you can use. So key thing is, where should you start? What should you do first? Because a lot of people tend to say, oh, I want a chatbot. But is that really the best place to start? And I always say, you must understand your strategy. Because if you don't understand your strategy, then you don't understand what your customer is going to perceive as value and how your customer wants to interact with you. So, Steve, from your perspective, where do you think people, and how do you think people should look at getting into applying the technology in customer experience?
I think the big part is, and we talk about it here, is following the metrics, understanding what your metrics tell you. So if you have a high volume of low value conversations, maybe a chatbot is for you. Maybe the conversational AI is where you want to focus. But what you need to make sure you do here is whatever solution you pick, you will need to think solve, not just deflect. So often in the past, contact center technologies were very much around, we need to stop calls coming in, so we need to deflect them away at the edges. And that doesn't improve customer experience.
Yeah.
So if you think solve first, that's the key.
I think that's really important, actually, because a lot of people have, and still do actually, there is still a tendency to focus on reducing cost, and that means deflect calls away from agents. And I think this is where you need to understand who your customer is and what your customer preferences are. And by doing that, you solve the problem, not just deflect it onto somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about the customer, making the customer at the heart of this. So if you're not sure, if you don't have metrics, ask your customers. And that might be through surveys. And so that sample we talked about earlier with the bank and doing the feedback analysis, they were asking their customers, and they told them what was important to them. And I call this the measure first approach. So the old adage, measure twice, cut once. That phrase that is very true here as well. You need to understand what is happening before you start implementing, because if you don't have a strategy, as you mentioned at the beginning, you could end up investing a lot of time and money in something that doesn't move the needle as much as a different choice. It might be, and it really needs to understand what's important to your business and to your customers.
And badly implemented, it could be detrimental to your customer experience, not in any way enforce it. So it is something that's key. Steve, thank you for your time. I hope everyone has gained something from what we've talked about. And should you want to talk further, we're very, very happy to talk about any of the stuff we've covered today, to talk about the concepts, to talk about the human aspect of it, or even the strategic aspect of it. So hello apac@enghouse.com is always a good place to start. Please, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, then we're obviously happy to try and answer them if we can. And if we can't answer them, then we'll try and get back to you. Okay, thank you. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Alex. And definitely, I think a key point here is really about supporting our employees. And it's a common theme that we've heard across the 2 days. It makes me so happy because I think, of course, there was before this idea of how do we achieve customer experience, and it was really talking about business objectives. And now it really is empowering your employees to then streamline and actually hold them accountable with the autonomy to achieve customer experience for your business. I think this solution really does support that. Now, of course, we have a little bit moment of time, but I hope you don't mind for any questions that we might not get answered, that we answer them offline, because we will be sharing them with our audience. But I would love to hear, and I'm sure that a lot of individuals within the community, as is with any kind of change, there's a little bit of a fear factor, right? And this idea of whether technologies, particularly when you're looking at AI, do you see the solution as being something that's going to replace the contact center supervisor?
You're absolutely right. It's a common fear.
I see Alex just shaking his head going, no.
Yeah, something that this kind of technology can augment the supervisor and can take away some of the boring parts of the job. And at the end of the day, people are immensely creative and can do huge things, but they tend to be distracted by administrative process. So what we're trying to do here is take away the administrative burden and allow people to do what they really do well, which is help others to be better. Yeah. Ultimately, the goal here isn't to replace, it's to take away, let's be candid, quite a time-consuming and could be boring part of the job. And then allow them to focus on coaching and developing people. And if a part of a job is boring or administrative, it tends not to get the emphasis that it should do. So let the robot take away that, and the human aspect focus on the real added value. That's all we're trying to do. We're not in any way trying to replace the supervisor.
Absolutely.
I think it's the same with any kind of technology, right? It really is about providing them the tools necessary to be able to do their job, or be able to kind of free up some time to focus on potentially more complicated tasks or things that require more of their time. So absolutely agree with you there. Now, I talked earlier, and I think you're the one who mentioned it, about real-time coaching. And whether or not smart quality work also goes.
I broke up a bit there, so I think the question was about.
Yeah,
very
I
choppy,
didn't
but
get that at all, Felicia.
I think the question was about the real-time, whether the system worked in with smart quality worked in real time. So smart quality is focused on post-activity agent evaluation, so assessing the recordings. We have other products that solve the real-time element. So we have Vocal Coach, which we spoke about earlier on with the insurance system.
Yeah, I think it's horses for courses, and one of the key things we have to try and do is bring them together and use them as appropriate. Yeah, real time is very different. It is coaching the agent in the middle of a conversation, at the same time giving them lots of guidance but not distracting them. So helping them do it better, but not force them to be sitting over here being driven by a robot, but just guiding them in a simple way. I think Felicia may have gone at this point. So let's look at some of the other questions. Right, where are we? Machine learning. Does it use machine learning? And if so, how much does it need to start working? That's an interesting question. I know one that's very dear to your heart, Steve.
It is. It's a point of pride and a bugbear. So AI is often seen. Everyone talks about AI. You always need lots of data. You need thousands and thousands of samples before the AI starts doing anything. This is one of the advantages with our own AI engine. It's the proprietary technology that we use is a hybrid approach, which means we've taught, as I think I said during the presentation, we've taught it how to understand human language. So it understands the structure of the sentence. So we don't need thousands of samples. We can, once we tell it what we're looking for, it understands the structure of the human sentence. It's happy to go off and find those samples, without any issue. So that's the. So yeah, it doesn't need a lot of data.
That's good, because having a lot of data is sometimes problematic, because particularly when you're starting out. Another question that we've got is, how does the engine identify that an agent is struggling?
It's down to the supervisor. So we think about, how does the supervisor know that the agent is struggling? Because they've assessed them against a particular set of criteria. So that scorecard, that evaluation scorecard, is the heart of how smart quality works. So the system is populating the same types of scorecard as the supervisor would be doing manually. It's just doing it automatically behind the scenes.
Okay. And then we have a couple of questions, not unexpected questions, related to languages. And how do we handle languages in the APAC region? Which languages are supported?
Yep. So I think we've had two questions on two or three questions on the same thing here. So yes, they are. So currently, the smart quality is we've only taught smart quality English So we're focusing on English, and we need to. One of the things about our AI engine is we need to teach it the language. So we have a team of linguists, computational linguists, smart group of people that understand human language, and they teach the engine the language. They all speak multiple languages. So there we go. You're back.
I have no idea what happened, but my internet just completely went down. So I apologize for that. But I was just hearing about the language question, and I think that was probably going to be my next one. I do hear that a lot of the time there is a challenge, particularly given how diverse the APAC region is.
Yep. So I was just saying we've taught it English. That's what English. It only understands English at the moment, but we're adding languages all the time. So I was just talking about the team we have that do this. So it's a bright bunch of people. I like this stat. There are more PhDs in that team than there are people. So they're a bright bunch, and so they're teaching the system new languages all the time. So we're adding languages over the next year or so. We'll be adding multiple languages to be able to assess more than just English. But English is where we've started.
All right, perfect. I appreciate that. That's all we have time for today, but I would love to get those questions answered offline as well, and we can share that to our audience. I do appreciate your time today. I hope you guys can still hear me, and I look forward to welcoming you guys to our next session in just a little bit.